Hi, everybody. My name is Shirley Gutkowski, and I'm the author of More Than a Kissing Spot, Your New Baby's Face, a handbook for people getting ready to be parents. You are the target audience of this book. Thank you so much for coming here to Primal Air and having a session learning about yourself and your baby and your relationship with one another. Between the parents and between the parents and the child and between each individual child and the parents. There's a lot going on right now, and your life is going to be changing for the better. And there are going to be enormous challenges as you grow your family. And I'm here to tell you that my husband and I have 5 children. They are no longer children. We call them sons now because all of them are over 40. And it was not easy. It was not easy at all. And that's one of the reasons that prompted my practice here, Primal Air, and writing this book. We had a lot of problems with a lot of different things. And looking back, and this is what happens, right? You can't hit yourself over the head for what you didn't know. So we had a lot of sleep problems. We had some feeding problems. We just had a lot of different things happening. And we always thought, my husband and I, was that it was because there were just so many of them. So our youngest was born before our oldest was 5 years old. So we had twins in there, and it was just a crazy, crazy long time. One of the things that I didn't know about and that I'm here to help you know about is the idea that a baby's mouth is supposed to be closed, which is not the same as seen and not heard. It is that the baby is supposed to be breathing with their nose only. And so that is not anything that I ever really even thought of. I went to hygiene school, dental hygiene school, and became a dental hygienist after our 5th child was born. He was, I think, 3 when I graduated from my program. And it never occurred to me. And even during that whole school time, it never really came up to the point of how important it was to have a child breathe through their nose and to have a tongue that was free and mobile. So I had sleep problems when I was a child. I didn't call it sleep problems. Nobody would have said I had sleep problems, but I had nightmares almost every night. I died almost every night in my sleep. I didn't know that was tied to anything, but now I know that there's a breathing problem there. And that when my 5 and 6 and 7-year-old son, one in particular, would wake up and say, I didn't sleep at all last night. And I was like, whatever, there were 5 of them. They were all pretty much the same age. And this one's telling me he didn't sleep all night, but he came out in the morning and he looked like he slept all night. He was laying in bed all night. So when that turned into complaints of headaches in the morning, and I was another, again, harried mother. I had to get to work and yada, yada. And my husband worked second shift. So he was still trying to sleep while the kids were kind of getting up and out to school. He was complaining about headaches. And I thought to myself, there's no 7-year-old that has a headache. Get to school. I thought it was just a stall tactic for school. So I have an enormous amount of guilt for a lot of things that we had to blow over, or we didn't know enough not to blow over during that time. So when I learned about, I guess we all learned about this kind of thing, but we didn't put it all together. And now we do have a much better handle on how all of this stuff works together. So I started a practice with my son, the one with all the headaches, and we called it Primal Air because we wanted to kind of look at health and development through the eyes of a of a primal time. What did we look like before time was time? So that's kind of how we are looking at everything. So that's why I wrote this book. And what really drove the inciting incidents were patients now that were coming here with an 8-year-old kid, or they were already 50 or 60 or 70, and they becoming aware that the tongue tie that they knew they had and that their parents knew that they had was causing them all kinds of problems, everything from neck and shoulder pain to headaches to migraines to scoliosis to digestive disorders to anxiety to crooked teeth to, I don't know, just on and on. The list is unbelievable, and it's not very linear. You know, high blood pressure really is not very close together with digestive problems. So until you chisel all of that away, and I'm not expecting you to do that, we are in a situation where we're just stuck with what we have. There are epigenetic reasons for that, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today too. So I'm going to start by going into some of the pieces of the book, which still is not here, but it is at the printer, so it shouldn't be too much longer before we have physical copies here. So let's start with what the baby's face is even looking like from the outside and a little bit from the inside, and what constitutes the face and how the face is like the front part of a lot of growth and development of the whole body. This is a picture of the craniofacial respiratory complex. So we talk about craniofacial a lot in dentistry, really a lot, and we ignore, look how much of that picture there behind the inside of this red circle is the respiratory piece. That means the breathing piece. It's the back of the nose. It's the sinuses. This is a huge part of your child's face. So that is what we're going to be spending a little bit time talking about today. How does the face even grow? Let's talk about what happens during those first 1,000 days, the time between conception and weaning. During these first 1,000 days, the child is developing in the womb in a particular order, right? So at about 12 weeks, the tongue separates from the floor of the mouth as far as a structural thing. But there are very many other things that are going on as well. So if you look here, we have all of this is happening, you know, right out of the gate. These 18 to 24 prenatal days. This is the neural tube is starting to develop. We have a lot of growth right here between 7 to 3 months. And at about 3 months before you deliver, this myelination and brain development starts to really take off. At about 2 months before you have the baby, we start to see myelination. And there are many of you that are probably going, what the heck is myelination? And some of you are going, oh, myelination, I know what that is. So that is the covering of the large nerve cells in the body. So I know you learned this somewhere along the line. Maybe you weren't paying attention that day or even that 10 minutes when it was described. But there's a fatty covering that goes around a lot of the large nerves in your body. And it keeps the electrical currents from jumping out of the nerve and just hitting everywhere. It just really solidifies that nerve conduction, just like you would find on an electrical wire. That's why they're covered, so the electricity doesn't spark out all over. So that's what's happening to the nerves in your baby. What that covering is fat. This is huge. And it's showing up as being a problem in a lot of different places. It is not plant fat. It is not sesame seed oil. It is not canola oil. It is not sunflower seed oil. It's not anything like that. It is animal fat, animal cholesterol. That's what's protecting the nerves. If you are not eating enough egg yolks, if you are not eating enough fatty meats, I'm not saying cut off the fat of the meat and just eat that, although for some people that's probably the best option. Butter. If you're not eating butter every single day in your pregnancy time, you may be shorting the child of good, healthy fats. So that's a critical piece right here. So all of this stuff is really starting to hit home about 3 months before the baby comes onto the scene. Not only that, but the actual brain is almost 70% fat. When you go to a primal style diet or you go to a very cultural meat store or butcher and you see a brain on display for consumption, for cooking and eating, it's almost all fat. And I did see some at our Sun Prairie Walmart the other day. So there's that. So we can increase our fat intake pretty dramatically. Plus you won't be hungry all the time, but you have to maintain the appropriate fats. So now you have your baby, that myelination continues to happen and the brain is still growing. It's growing like crazy at this time. So this green line is, it's just cell migration, and synaptogenesis is how many nerves interact with one another. So this is what this incredible increase in the synaptogenesis in the brain is what gets the brain to grow. This is also very important. These neurotransmitters need actual human food in order to work and to grow. And then you have this just incredible growth of the top of the head. This growth is mitigated or initiated and continues on because of what's happening in the brain and how the brain is growing. Once the baby is out in the environment, that requires air. Air, air, air. In order for that baby's brain to optimize, it needs to have a lot of oxygen. And the oxygen needs to come in through the nose. You may think that it feels like you get more air when you're open mouth breathing, but you're not. It's all about the nose. So these are the things that I want you to really think about as you're developing your diet and your birth plan and your and just how you plan on raising your child. The taste buds start growing at about 13 weeks. We have a lot of muscles that are coming into play. We divide the tongue into thirds. The front third should be loose and mobile. The middle third should be able to reach up to the palate. So I'm stopping right now because I know all of you are wondering if the middle third of your tongue is reaching your palate. So give it a try. The tongue is then separated from the floor of the mouth at about 8 weeks. If it doesn't, and that happens because of a number of reasons, some of them are food related, some of them are environment related. I learned just today that bass fish, learn how to identify a lure. And that's passed on 2 generations, and that's why lures stop working, in case you didn't know. So how does the baby know about that lure when it's never had contact with that lure. So that fish, that particular kind of fish, translates that information to the reproductive cells. So the eggs or the sperm of those fish take on that information and put it onto the DNA of the reproductive cells. And then the next generation of those fish no longer are attracted to that kind of lure. That's called epigenetics because it's really fast. If it was evolution, it would take a really long time for that to happen. And we've really only been using lures for a short time, evolutionarily speaking. In the womb, the baby is tasting, it's moving around, it's hearing, it's touching things, it's blinking. And this is what it looks like when the baby's kicking around in there, in case you were wondering. They're moving around in there and they're exercising everything. What they're not doing is breathing or smelling. Now, there's been some conversation about whether or not they're getting smell sensations from the amniotic fluid, but that's the question. They're either smelling in utero and the only thing they're not practicing is breathing, or they're also smelling out here. So there's that. The baby's covered in that vernix that you've heard so much about. I think we'll be discovering that the vernix is a growth medium to pass the mother's skin microbiome to the baby. That's why when you have the baby, to have them put the naked baby on your naked skin is optimal. And then that breast crawl should take place. I don't know how the teaching is about breast crawl. I barely learned about it a few years ago myself. It's an amazing thing. The baby will crawl to your breast. It is attracted to the smell of the microbiome of your areola and nipple, and that your nipple is darker than the surrounding skin. So it's going to move its way up there, and it's going to grunt and carry on. This is the lungs getting clear. I don't think I've ever seen a baby upside down and getting smacked anymore to get them to cry. So the crawl is part of the development of this craniofacial respiratory complex. It seems terrible or mean to shove a baby through a little tube like that and then expect it to go to work some more, like they're not finished. But let's remember that babies are born about 6 months premature as compared to other mammals. So all other mammals have their babies in the womb for approximately what human time would be 6 months longer than what we do. But because we are upright and standing, our hips and pelvis and all of that is, Dr. Shalom can probably talk more about that, but it's now in a situation where the baby's head would never fit. So that's why we have the babies so early, and that's why they are so dependent on the mother. And this is a key feature here, that there's that dependency between the mother and the baby that cannot be matched. And they're really only one person still. This is a really hard thing to think about. And I wish our legislators would also get on board with this with respect to maternity leave. I am a complete, capitalist. I'm not in favor of paying people for not being at work. I don't resonate with that at all. But when we're talking about this mother-baby thing, we at least have to make it easier for those mothers to have a baby, or the mothers have to take the bull by the horns and quit their job. You're going to kill me. Quit their job, have a smaller house and an older car, have lower monthly payments so that the mother can be home with the baby. I know that's very unpopular, but But under the situation, and as I'm going to map this all out here, I think you might come to a new understanding of why it's so important. And these are pieces that are not out in the world, even though they're true. I went to work. I went back to school. My baby was a couple of weeks old, and I was in class taking my undergraduate classes for pre-dental. Actually, I was in actual college, not just tech school at the time. And it was hard. And I didn't know what I didn't know then either, but we can pass this information along, which is one of the things also that is happening, is that we're moving away from our ancestors, and then this cultural ancestral piece is not following us along. So these are just kind of things that I kind of like to bring to light here as we talk about how babies develop and how the mouth then can be the center of all of this kind of stuff. Dentistry has taken a weird position with respect to infants. Even pediatric dentists, when I was a practicing clinical dental hygienist, even pediatric dentists didn't want to see the kid until they were 3. There's no teeth. They don't hold still. What's the big deal? This is the big deal. We have to be on track. Dentistry is overseeing the growth and development of this craniofacial respiratory complex. We need to get these dentists and these pediatric dentists on board. In Madison right now, we have a few. I can't name them because I only know kind of tangentially who is kind of on board with this. But dentistry is in charge of the growth and development of this craniofacial respiratory complex. And the more you know, the better off you can be. We have the cranium, which is growing, as I mentioned, due to brain development. We have the face, and then we have the respiratory complex that starts up in the middle of the face. The brain grows to increase the size of the top of the head. The mandible, the chin, grows in a match to the maxilla, which is the bone that holds your top teeth in. The maxilla, ironically, is also the floor of the sinuses. So if that doesn't grow correctly, you end up with sinus infections, ear infections, sinus problems, deviated septum, all kinds of sinusy kind of problems. We have this situation this is why I'm just so about it. It is so common for babies to have their mouths open that it is considered normal. It is not normal. It is common. Okay? It is normal to go over the speed limit, but it is, it's normal to go the speed limit, and it's common to go over the speed limit. So these are things that we kind of have to separate a little bit. Babies can breathe through their nose and should. Who is going to tell either of these mothers that their baby doesn't look pretty or that there's a problem with the baby? We really end up in this terrible situation. So I want you to know this in advance, not to get you all fretted up and jazzed up about it. It just is a concern, and there are things you need to do to kind of make it so that the baby doesn't have their mouth open so much. The mouth is an escape hatch. It's an emergency route for air. So if you were chased by a tiger up a tree and then you fell out of the tree in super olden days, in the time before time, that was how you were supposed to breathe so that you wouldn't die of lack of air. So what do? You pinch the baby's lips together. Not like you're popping a zit. You're lightly pushing the lips together. A lot of people say to lift the chin. That doesn't work. You have to push the lips together. So every time you see it, just push the lips together. You might have to do it 1,000 times or 5,000 times. Every time you do it, you're one step closer to not having to do it anymore. This is number one key element in getting the baby to breathe using the nose. We know all of this because of the study by Weston A. Price, studies of Weston A. Price. He went to sequestered communities across the globe, and he went to look at why his patients in their third generation living in the United States all had dental problems, but their grandparents or parents who came over as immigrants did not. He is also the father of nutrition. He found that people that did not become exposed to the diet of the West had wide arches, low arches, wide noses, wide teeth, all 32 teeth, no cavities, no illness. The babies didn't cry. There were like zero problems. We often think about olden days and people were sick and they died early. These people die from accident or attack or war. They did not die of diabetes. They did not die of chronic illnesses. They didn't have any of that to die from. They ate a diet that was local to them. Once they had the foods of modern commerce, even by 1930 standards, they started to have a lot of dental decay. They had a lot of periodontal disease. They had constricted arches that made their teeth crowded. We are in a very unusual stage, the great food experiment. All of human diseases are on an upward trajectory in the United States. We do not have a good track record for even keeping infants alive. Our birth rate is not number one in the globe. It's not even number two. It's like number, I don't know, it's 10 or something. It's way lower than you would ever imagine. We've modified our foods for sweetness. We've included seed oils to the exclusion of all animal fats, and we've been demonizing saturated fat. And those have made changes to our DNA, as I was alluding to with the Bass story. So our DNA has little tags on it, and those tags tell us how to look and be in the next generation. And if your baby is working with a poor oral posture, your DNA then is, or the baby's DNA, it came from the mother and it came from the mother's mother, is now tagged again for the next generation. So it's continuation. So it's our job to stop it, like zero. It's now. We think it's going to take between 2 and 4 generations of proper nutrition to get us out of this terrible situation we're at. So the sooner we start, the better. This is, sorry for the language there, Dr. Kevin Boyd has been studying this for quite some time. You might even have heard of him, or you will soon. He is a pediatric dentist in Chicago, and he came across this book, The Clinician's Guide to Breastfeeding, and in the book, just right out, bare naked open, it said all babies are born with a small degree of retrognathia. That means that the chin is set back. There was nowhere in the book that said why he was able to state that so definitively. And so he went to look across the globe. He himself went to almost every museum that had fetal skulls, right? It's kind of hard to get fetal skulls because they're mostly cartilage. And so there's not many left. So he went to study them, and he found that only modern humans, like seriously modern, for the last 150 years or so, have the chins been going back. He could not find any retrognathia, so that's chin back, in any fetal skulls in the pre-industrial times. So the industrial times, they're saying, is starting about 1890, 1880. So it's, it's hardly 150 years ago. So he did an x-ray of this big skull here on the right, and then he overlaid it with what we all see now as, a sonogram, a 4D sonogram or 3D. I don't know how many Ds they are up to. I don't know what the fourth D would be. So, and this is what he's seeing, that the angle of the chin is much wider and that it is set back in more and more children. And I don't know what he does, but he keeps saying that he's doing stuff at this stage. He can make changes and get ready for that baby that needs things to happen right away with just the sonogram. When you go to his office, he's very interested to have a photo of that sonogram. These no-chin kids are very, very, very common. I think these are pretty much, these are the same kid. So is it hereditary? This dad was like, what am I going to do about my baby? He's doing this, he's doing that. And I said, well, what does he look like? And so he sent me a picture, and I was like, wow, his chin isn't all that far back, but his lips aren't closed. So there's that. And then he's in a situation that nutrition's going to be difficult. There's going to be poor chewing and poor breathing. And all of a sudden I looked back and I thought, wait, look at his. He doesn't have a chin at all. His mouth is open too. So is it hereditary? Maybe. Maybe it was epigenetic. Maybe he's on his third generation. Maybe he's the fourth generation of family members who have grown up on a seed diet. So the maxilla is the thing that we're talking about, and that is the green bone in this picture. I want to point out that this bone also holds up the eyes. Holds up, it's the bottom of the orbit. And this yellow bone right here in the back is called the sphenoid bone. It's kind of, they say, the shape of a butterfly. So the wings, can you see on the outside of the skull here? If this maxilla doesn't grow, this bone back here, the sphenoid bone that Dr. Shalom is going to talk about, or she just did talk about, is going to be affected. If this bone and this bone are both affected, what's going to happen to the shape of the eyeball? One of the things that really triggered me was this study that you can find on YouTube. It's a summary. I don't know, it's 15 minutes long. And Dr. Pottinger raised groups of cats on the same diet across many generations. So a cat generation is about a year. A human generation is about 20, 30 years, somewhere in between there. So you can really see a lot on a cat. So all the cats were fed 1/3 of their diet as a species appropriate diet. So raw meat, raw milk. Then he separated the rest of them out, and they were separate in pens, right? So they weren't mixed up, so they couldn't accidentally get the wrong food. He had one group of cats that was fed cooked meat. One group was fed cooked meat and like pasteurized milk. And one group was fed sweetened condensed milk. And then in the first generation, in the poor nutrition group, you can see how things just didn't fuse. The poor cat was missing teeth. The mandible was just all apart. The reason it's apart is the way that they take, they take these apart is to take the flesh off of the bone, and the cartilage that doesn't fuse and doesn't make bone also dissolves. And then this is what happened in the third generation. It's it's horrible. So not only did their bones not work very well, They were exhausted. They had poor coordination. They had a lot of dental problems. The first described asthma were in these third generation, cat asthma, in the third generation on the poor diet. If they were able to conceive, they had many stillborn, many allergies. They were a train wreck. After 4 generations on the species-specific diet, so the repaired diet, the physiological normalcy was achieved. So the next 4 generations had to be on the raw meat, raw milk diet before they were physiologically cat-like again. So it gave me very, a big motivation to make this work, because these cats were able to recover. But human generation is like 30 years, so we have a lot of work to do right now to get the next generation also to be on board, and then that next generation also to be on board. We got a lot of work to do. So Dr. Pottenger and Dr. Price were colleagues, and they developed the Price-Pottenger organization on nutrition. So they really made a huge impact. But of course, that was right around World War II, or right after World War II. And so a lot of the stuff got pushed to the side because of all the shenanigans that were happening. When you have a child that has no, I think I have the sound turned off, but this baby is stopping breathing. Took a breath. Super snotty sounding. Stopped. Took a breath. That's how long he was pausing in his breathing. So after he had his tonsils and adenoids out, he was able to breathe like normally. You can see his chin is back, so you have one indicator for a problem right there. He's still breathing with his mouth open. It looks as though he's breathing with his mouth. It's hard to say. If the tongue is up, it's almost impossible to breathe with your mouth. So I'm going to have you try that right now. So put your tongue against the roof of your mouth. Open your mouth with the tongue still up there and try to breathe through your mouth. So if your baby has at least the tongue up, still pinch the lips, but know that the baby is nasally breathing. We know that kids who breathe with their nose have rounder, better look. I don't know. I don't see anybody, so I can say stuff, and I don't know what you guys look like. But these longer, narrower faces who, you can love a long, narrow face. I'm not all about that. But these open mouths and the sad eyes and all of that stuff kind of comes with oral breathing. Not only that, but we also know that mouth-breathing people don't develop good sinus size. So, right there, that should be a big, like, whoo, I want my kid to have full sinuses. So I always like to bring up this picture. I was super happy when I found it. What if you had the size sinuses of a 12-year-old and now you're 45? Can't regain all of this. So it's really, really critical that we keep the mouth closed and develop the sinuses. All of this is coming from low tongue posture. Breastfeeding is important because breastfeeding will give us clues as to whether the tongue is working or not. We want our parents to breastfeed as long as possible. Okay? This is really key. It's not about the milk. They're going to tell you it's about the milk and that you can just pump. And one the other reasons that I wrote my book was because parents were coming here and I was hearing stories. Nipples are old, nipples are short, nipples are too small, they're too big, they're too flat, they're too fat, they're too this, they're too that. You're allergic to the baby's allergic to its mother's milk. The mother's milk dried up at 4 months. This kind of stuff is absolutely unreal. Find somebody who believes you. You are at one with that child. If that child is a few days old and your nipples are bleeding already, that's a problem with the baby's mouth. It is not a problem with your nipples. Don't let them fool you. So we talked about epigenetics a few minutes ago with respect to the fish. And I also talked a little bit about the chin and how the epigenetic tags were on the mother, or on the eggs and on the sperm actually, but it's easier for men to clean up their sperm than it is for women to clean up their eggs, because you're born with all of the trouble that your grandmother did. So women are born with all the eggs they're ever going to have, and it's really hard to change the DNA in those eggs. We're drinking salads, we're using foods that require no chewing, and we're eating anti-human fats. And all of that is on these eggs. So this woman is smoking. So this is a 1970s woman, right? She's smoking. She's allowed to have 2 drinks a day. The fetus here is you the mother sitting here right now. And these eggs are in you while she's smoking. Your eggs are developing, right? While she's having her whiskey sour, or wait a minute, this is Wisconsin. It's all about brandy old fashioned, right? So these eggs now are in this fetus. Now you come out, now you're her, and you're not smoking. Heaven forbid, you would never smoke. Oh my God, you would never eat so much fat. You're on a fat-free diet or whatever, or some other something that they're letting you do today that we shouldn't be doing, ancestrally speaking. And now the damage that she put onto these eggs here is now magnified by all the naughty things that you're doing. And this baby then, if it's a girl baby, has even worse eggs. So, it's not too late. It's probably not too late at all for you to be aware and make some changes right now that you can, and then make sure that your baby has the best outcome. It's like a resting doll situation. Russian nesting dolls. Grandmas pass on their history. Did they smoke? Did they drink? Were they living in war times? Were they out partying all the time? Did they go from bed to bed? Who's going to ask their grandma if they slept around? I'm not. And then this is how things just keep on going and going. And we're not looking here. We're not looking generations back to the things that we were doing to what is happening today. The mechanics of the food is of equal importance as the nutritional content of the food. So it's really important that you breastfeed with your breast. Don't drink your food. Take the time it takes to eat. Chew, chew, chew. If you have to do this chewing-free food, start chewing gum. Get some clean gum and start chewing so that the baby's DNA starts to recognize that chewing is important. Throw away your mixers. You have no business on it. It's completely anti-human to drink this amount of food. It would take you the whole day to eat this much, right? It's all sugar on top of it. Chewing cycles have been going down since World War II. Even in the 80s, it was only half. The amount of time we're chewing is half as much as what it was before World War II. This is all being translated into the eggs, and it's being measured. Mixing your food increases the sugar. Gives you a huge insulin response. So when we talk about fats, we have to talk about the difference between seed oil and, between seed and fruit oils. Vegetable oils don't come from vegetables. They come from the seed of the vegetable, and it's a huge manufacturing process in order to get from the seed to the oil. If you've ever squeezed a sunflower seed, you will spend a whole day trying to get anything that's slippery out of it. Fats come from animals as well. So fruit oils would be things like avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil. Those are fruits. Those are not seeds. Those are appropriate, but not as appropriate as animal fats. I can't believe that we threw away so many egg yolks for so many years. It's just unbelievable. So eat your eggs, throw away the whites, eat your fat that can come from the fruit of the plant. When you squeeze an avocado, you can feel how oily it is. That's a clue right there. We can also get animal fats now that are just rendered and clean that you can just use instead of oil. You can use beef tallow or pork lard to fry your eggs in or fry your steak. Duck fat, my mother was very ancestrally motivated, or stuck, I don't know, depends. If you're talking to 30-year-old me, she was stuck, and now she was like, oh my gosh, she was so far ahead. So they used to just take duck fat and spread it on a piece of half-rye bread and a little bit of salt, and that was their lunch. I'm telling you, they loved it. They were like, oh, we have duck fat, you know. And we're starting to see a lot more of these kind of studies where Alzheimer's, I'm calling it flat out a fat deficiency. Fibromyalgia, every nerve disease, Parkinson's, is a very good chance that it is a fat deficiency in the diet over time. So just start with butter. Eat a half a stick a day. Good luck. Eat butter every day. After your meal, take a pat of butter or 2 pats of butter. You'll be surprised at how yummy butter is. I've been avoiding it all this time, and just, I don't know, a couple months ago, I was like, well, I could turn this butter into something, but I don't feel like it. So what if I just cut a little piece of butter off? Oh, that's not bad. It's kind of a sweet and salty. My first little straight butter was Kerrygold butter that I got at Costco. So try it. Try adding more butter. The cell walls, all those cells that are making more and more cells and more of your baby and increasing your baby's size dramatically during that first year, is made up of a bilipid layer. So part of the problem is that there are so many words for each thing. So lipid is a fat, stearic acid is a fat, and so lipids, fats, and I don't know, I'll come up with the other one in just a minute. But there's a couple of different words for fat. But this is 2 layers right here. This is a layer of fat, and this is a layer of fat, and they are opposing electricities, right? And so they stay lined up like this. And in the wall are a lot of different pieces that translate the outside to the inside of the wall. This is where vitamin D is made. This is where your sugar gets in. This is where all of this stuff is happening. If you look at what a saturated fatty acid looks like, that's what they told us to not eat anymore, right? They're like, oh my God, you can't eat saturated fats. It's a nice straight fat. Unsaturated fats and trans fats look like this. They have an angle. They're not straight. So when you start to put these not straight ones and mix them in with these straight ones, this cell wall is no longer working right. So this is why the fats are so important, especially as you're growing a human, and for you also. Dads especially, get your fats corrected. You need to eat better fats so that your sperm becomes improved, so that you're not developing this DNA tag that says, you know, you can incorporate seed oils into the cell wall. This is just one example of how vitamin D is made in the cell and how the cell wall is integral in that process. If the cell wall isn't good, you're not going to make as much vitamin D. And they're saying now that vitamin D is like the missing link for like every disease, everything from viral infections to things like Parkinson's. Vitamin D is really, really critical. In Wisconsin, you cannot get or make vitamin D in your skin between, November to March. So you have to make it all while you're, out and about in the summer, or take a supplement. Mothers should especially be taking supplements. A couple of years ago, I created this nutrition continuum. And so this is kind of going back to ancestral foods to not really food anymore. I like to divide things out because everybody kind of knows what a toxin is, or you're kind of more aware. But there's a big difference between food and something to eat. Food would be something that's raw, that's freshly killed, or, the way that we eat meat is usually just, it's not real old, but it's, aged and dried. And then if you take it and then you mix it with a bunch of stuff or add a bunch of ingredients, then it starts to go more towards something to eat. If you get off of all seed oils for a few months and you go to your favorite restaurant, you're going to be sick after. There's going to be something. You're going to go, wow, my knees really hurt. Or what is my stomach like gurgling? Because your body now doesn't know what to do with it anymore. It's been putting up with it long enough. And then you start processing it more and more, and then you just turn it into toxins. So a good example would be this, like an apple. An apple's a food. This is mildly processed, right? You take some of the moisture out, you cut it, you take some of the parts out. Then you turn it into something to eat by adding a bunch of ingredients, and now you add some fat to it. Now you add some fat and heat to it, and you turn it into this almost a toxin. And then you take everything out and you just pull apart one piece, and this is a toxin. This is a driver of insulin that will really hurt the whole system. We had longer forward drifting faces. We used to have room for 32 teeth with space behind, and we just don't anymore. And because of good medicine, we are living longer, but we're not living better. Our health span is not as long as our lifespan. We can't even count on natural selection anymore because of medicine. And I'm not here to say, let's get rid of medicine. I've had a number of surgeries. I don't know. I never had a thing problem. Never. And then now I broke my leg, so I had to have surgery for that. Then somehow I developed a macular hole in my eye. What is that about? And now I have a cataract that's been ramped up because of the macular hole surgery. It's just been just stupid. But my quality of life is there. And I have pretty much a good health span, even though I'm still outsized. Have to kind of think about the difference between progress and innovation. And innovation is a catalytic converter, where we were able to take the lead out of gasoline so that we wouldn't be breathing in these toxic lead fumes all the time. And then innovation, progress, I'm not sure about these electric cars because you still need to find electricity somewhere. And they make it sound like you're going to get all your electricity from falling water, and that's not really true. So anyway, there's that. We have, with respect to vitamin D, we have skin color managed as much vitamin D as we were making, and as we migrated further from the equator, our skin color got lighter and lighter. But then clothing became necessary, so now we're blocking the vitamin D, okay? But in the summer, we could still make the right amount of vitamin D. But our vitamin D manufacturing became less and less. And then we started with these skin cancer scares, which are unbelievable. You'll notice that once you get rid of the seed oils, you're not going to burn anymore. And you won't have to worry so much about your baby's skin with the sun. And then we started sunscreens. Woohoo! Now we're all over the place with problems from the sunscreen itself, particularly the vitamin D. So you can also look to see who's making the money. We used to do this to our babies. Don't do anything like that anymore. This is called hormetic. This is a hormetic application of cold. So they weren't out there forever. They were out there for maybe 20 minutes or whatever. They're bundled up. They're sleeping. They're fine. But they had a little charge of what it would be like to live in cold. We've got this eat the rainbow message, and then we turn it into these pills. It's really just unbelievable. This was an actual post from a hygienist on Facebook, and I sent her a message and I said, dude, there's no food in your picture. And she's like, oh, but Shirley, you don't understand how they grow the food before they make it into these powders. And I was like, whatever. Don't fall for this crap. Really, you need to work out the diet better. So as we turn back to my little book here, we can talk about tongue tie. There's a lot to be said about that. So many people are saying that there's no such thing as a tongue tie, and that it's a money-making scheme. Well, if you don't address the tongue tie, the medical establishment will be making a boatload of money. They will do everything. They'll tube feed your baby, which is not cheap. They'll put your baby on pills, which is ridiculous. And instead of a tongue assessment and finding that tongue tie and addressing the tie so that you can successfully nurse your baby. So I alluded to it a number of times, and then I never really said. So let's go over that right now. The tongue puts pressure on the palate. That is how the palate grows. There are competing pressures with the cheeks. Every time you're breastfeeding, the tongue is pushing the breast up into the palate and growing the palate. When the baby is not nursing, the palate is growing if the tongue is pressed against it. That's how that system works. And so if the tongue is low, the palate has a hard time growing. And it may even be narrower and narrower because of the competing pressures of those cheeks. Some of the things that you can look for already, I know that there are a million things online you can look at, but this little book should be handy for you. When the baby's crying, it looks like the whale tail. Is the tip of the tongue heart-shaped? Is there blanching? That means, is it turning white under the tongue when the baby's crying? Is the baby's tongue sticking out much of the time? Is nursing hard? Is there all kinds of excuses for nursing and nobody's looked and found a tongue tie? Milk blisters on the lips, milky coating on the back of the tongue. And I'm sure your lactation consultant will help you decide what's real and what's not. As the mother, if you have pain, if there's a problem with the nursing, it's real. If your milk dries up early, it's because the tongue is not functioning. Very rare for your milk to dry up. I know I sound like this is black and white. There's all kinds of gray in there. The baby is missing milestones. It's another one. Here are some hurdles you didn't count on that you're going to hear from your doctors. They're going to give you medications and feeding tubes that the doctor is like, oh, the baby's allergic to your milk. How is that even possible? The doctor thinks it's fine. The lactation workers is like, fed is best, fed is best. Find somebody to look at the tongue. Dr. Shalom has been getting very good at tongue tie assessments. And I know how to do that too. I can help you out, and we can find you somebody who's going to do that release for you. This is a tongue tie right here. You can see it's a little bit of a heart shape here. You can see that there's a little milk still on the back. You're going to need a lot of people to help you, including a doula, which I don't think I have on here, but they might be the first person to help you figure out that there's something wrong with the baby. You'll need a chiropractor, a myofunctional therapist, a nutritionist, a craniosacral therapist, pediatric dentist, even a pediatric ENT. Sounds huge. We're in big trouble because of the government. I know. They told us we could eat this way, and we cannot. It is not a human diet that they've told us we should be eating. So that's pretty much it, I think. I'm not even sure how long I've been talking, and I'm sure if there were parts that you skipped over, and that's fine. I can't be here. I can't be everywhere all the time. And I have a lot of calls and different appointments on Tuesday evening, so it was impossible. I'm so thrilled that you're here and that you now know more than anybody else with a ball of knowledge that you're going to have to really think about and pull apart. The book is going to be ready. I'm sure Emily will know when it's ready if you want to just keep in touch with her. And then thank you so much. Again, my name is Shirley Gutkowski, and I own Primal Air here, and I work real close with Dr. Shalom and with Emily. We've treated Emily's family, and we've all had a really good time learning and growing together. Have a great rest of your meeting.